The desert air hung heavy with the lingering heat of an Arizona summer evening as Marcus Williams laced up his running shoes on the front porch of his modest apartment. The 28-year-old veteran had developed a routine since returning from his third deployment in Afghanistan, a nightly 5-mile run through downtown Phoenix that helped quiet the restless energy that still plagued him months after his discharge. The familiar weight of his dog tags bounced against his chest as he stretched his hamstrings, preparing for what he thought would be just another peaceful evening jog. Marcus had chosen his route carefully over the past 6 months, winding through the safer neighborhoods where streetlights illuminated the sidewalks and late-night joggers were a common sight. Tonight felt no different as he set off at his usual steady pace, his breath forming a rhythm that matched his footfalls on the concrete. The city was quieting down, with most businesses closing and families settling in for the evening. Marcus found solace in these moments, the steady thrum of traffic in the distance, the occasional bark of a dog, the gentle hum of air conditioning units working overtime against the persistent desert heat. As he rounded the corner onto 7th Street, Marcus noticed the usual landmarks: the 24-hour diner with its flickering neon sign, the old gas station where Mrs. Rodriguez always waved from behind the counter, and the small park where teenagers gathered to play basketball under the lights. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even. He had been running for about 20 minutes when he decided to take a slight detour through the business district, where the wider sidewalks made for easier running and the scenery provided a pleasant change of pace. It was exactly 9:47 p.m. when Officer Kane's patrol car first appeared in Marcus's peripheral vision. The black and white cruiser rolled slowly alongside him, matching his jogging pace with an almost predatory patience. Marcus felt the familiar knot of anxiety that had plagued him since childhood, that instinctive wariness that came from growing up black in America, amplified by countless news stories and personal experiences that reminded him how quickly routine encounters could turn dangerous. Marcus kept running, maintaining his steady pace while stealing glances at the patrol car. Through the passenger window, he could see Officer Kane's profile, a thick-set white man in his 40s with a permanent scowl etched into his features. Kane appeared to be speaking into his radio, though Marcus couldn't make out the words over a sound of his own breathing and footfalls. 3 blocks later, the red and blue lights erupted behind him like fireworks against the darkening sky. The siren gave a brief, authoritative chirp that seemed to echo off the surrounding buildings. Marcus's heart rate, already elevated from his run, spiked with adrenaline as he slowed to a stop, his hands instinctively moving away from his body. In the non-threatening gesture he practiced countless times in his mind, Officer Kane emerged from his patrol car with the deliberate swagger of someone accustomed to being in control. His hand rested casually on his service weapon as he approached, his eyes scanning Marcus from head to toe with undisguised suspicion. "Evening, sir," Kane said, his voice carrying the false politeness that barely concealed underlying hostility. "We received a call about a suspicious black male breaking into vehicles in this area. Mind if I ask what you're doing out here?" Marcus felt his mouth go dry, but he forced himself to remain calm and respectful. "I'm just out for my evening run, officer. I live about a mile from here." He reached slowly toward his pocket, telegraphing his movements. "I have my ID if you'd like to see it." "Keep your hands where I can see them," Kane barked, his demeanor shifting instantly from false pleasantness to open aggression. "Don't reach for anything unless I tell you to." Marcus immediately raised his hands, his military training kicking in. He knew how to follow orders, how to de-escalate situations, and most importantly, how to survive encounters with hostile authority figures. "Yes, sir. My hands are visible. I'm reaching for my military ID. I'm a veteran." Kane's radio crackled to life, and he spoke into it without taking his eyes off Marcus. Unit 47 requesting backup for a suspicious person stop. Send K-9 unit if available. The word sent a chill down Marcus's spine. This was escalating far beyond a simple encounter, and he couldn't understand why. As they waited for backup, Kane began peppering Marcus with questions. Where exactly did he live? What was his full name? Did he have any warrants? Had he been drinking or using drugs? Each question felt like an accusation, and Marcus answered them all with the measured patience of someone who understood that his life might depend on his responses. Within minutes, a second patrol car arrived, its lights painting the surrounding buildings in alternating red and blue. From the back seat emerged Rex, an imposing German shepherd whose dark eyes seemed to bore into Marcus's soul. The dog's handler, a younger officer whose name tag read Martinez, approached with Rex on a short leash, the animal's attention focused intently on Marcus. This the suspect? Martinez asked, and Marcus felt his heart sink at the word suspect. He had gone from a citizen out for an evening jog to a suspected criminal in the span of minutes, and the transformation felt both surreal and terrifyingly familiar. Kane nodded. Grimly. Claims he's just jogging, but you know how it is in this neighborhood. We need to search him and his belongings. Marcus wanted to protest, to ask what probable cause they had, but he knew that challenging police authority in this moment could easily turn fatal. As Rex began to circle around him, Marcus noticed something strange about the dog's behavior. Instead of the focused, methodical movements he'd seen in military working dogs overseas, Rex seemed almost playful, his tail wagging slightly as he sniffed around Marcus's running shoes. It was then that Officer Kane reached into his own pocket, palming something small as he pretended to adjust his radio. The setup was about to begin, and Marcus Williams, decorated veteran, honor student, and law-abiding citizen, was about to become another statistic in Officer Kane's corrupt game of manufactured justice. The steel door of cell block C clanged shut behind Marcus Williams with a finality that seemed to echo through his bones. The Maricopa County Jail's intake process had been a blur of humiliation, fingerprinting, mugshots, strip searches, and the soul-crushing moment when they handed him the standard-issue orange jumpsuit that would mark him as an inmate. Now, at 2:30 a.m., Marcus sat on the edge of a thin mattress that reeked of industrial disinfectant and human desperation, trying to process how his evening jog had become a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The cell he'd been assigned was a cramped concrete box designed to house 2 men, but currently holding 3. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed with an incessant electrical hum that seemed designed to prevent sleep, casting everything in a harsh, sterile glow that made the pale green walls look sickly. Through the small window in the door, Marcus could see the constant movement of guards and the occasional shuffle of other inmates being processed through the system. His cellmates were already sizing him up when he arrived. The first was a mountain of a man named Big Mike, whose tattooed arms and scarred knuckles suggested a long history with the criminal justice system. Mike had grunted a brief acknowledgement before returning to his paperback novel, apparently uninterested in the newcomer. The second cellmate, however, was different. Tommy Ramirez couldn't have been more than 19, with intelligent dark eyes that seemed far older than his years, and a nervous energy that kept his hands in constant motion. He was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall, shuffling a deck of cards with practiced ease when Marcus entered. Unlike Big Mike, Tommy was immediately curious about the new arrival. First time? Tommy asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper to avoid attracting the guard's attention. When Marcus nodded, Tommy's expression softened with something. That might have been sympathy. Yeah, I can tell. You got that. This can't be happening to me, look. What did they get you for? Marcus found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. Cocaine possession. But I've never touched drugs in my life. I'm a veteran, just got back from Afghanistan 6 months ago. The words felt foreign in his mouth, as if he were describing someone else's life. Tommy's card shuffling stopped abruptly, and he leaned forward with sudden intensity. Wait, back up. Tell me exactly what happened. Where were you arrested? Which cop? Something in Tommy's tone made Marcus focus. Over the next 20 minutes, he recounted every detail of his encounter with Officer Kane and Rex, the strange, stalking behavior of the patrol car, Kane's immediate hostility, the convenient discovery of the cocaine, and Rex's odd behavior during the search. As Marcus spoke, he noticed Tommy's expression growing darker. The young man's hands had stopped their nervous fidgeting, and he was listening with the intensity of someone hearing a story he'd heard before. When Marcus finished, Tommy was quiet for a long moment, glancing toward Big Mike to make sure he was still absorbed in his book. Jesus Christ, Tommy whispered finally. Same thing happened to my cousin Eddie last month. Exactly the same thing. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. What do you mean? Exactly the same. Tommy scooted closer, lowering his voice even further. Eddie was walking home from work. He's a mechanic at Rodriguez Auto Shop downtown. Same time of night, same area where you got stopped. Officer Kane pulled him over, claimed someone reported a suspicious person. Same German Shepherd dog, same search, same discovery of drugs that Eddie swears weren't his. The cell suddenly felt smaller, the air thicker. Marcus's military training had taught him to recognize patterns, and this was beginning to look like something far more sinister than bad luck. What happened to your cousin? Public defender convinced him to take a plea deal. 18 months probation, community service, drug counseling. Eddie couldn't afford to fight it. He's got 3 kids and couldn't risk losing his job over a trial. Tommy's voice carried a bitterness that seemed to age him another decade. But here's the thing, Eddie's been clean for 5 years. Goes to ANA meetings every week, sponsors other guys trying to get sober. There's no way he was carrying. Marcus absorbed this information, his analytical mind racing. You said last month. Have there been others? Tommy nodded grimly. That's what I've been trying to figure out since I got here. Been asking around. And there's at least 4 other guys in this block, alone, who got popped by Kane in the last 6 months. All minorities, 2 black guys, 1 Latino, 1 Native American. All claiming they were set up. All involving that same dog. Big Mike looked up from his book then, apparently having overheard more of the conversation than he'd let on. You talking about Officer Kane? His voice was a low rumble. It seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. That bastard's been working this block for years, but something changed about 6 months ago. His arrest numbers went through the roof. Marcus turned to study the older man more carefully. Despite his intimidating appearance, Big Mike's eyes held intelligence and something that might have been respect when he looked at Marcus. You seem to know a lot about police statistics for someone in county lockup, Marcus observed. I should. I used to be one of them. Big Mike closed his book and sat up straighter. 22 years with Phoenix PD before I got caught skimming from evidence lockup. Stupid mistake that cost me everything. But that's another story. Point is, I know how the game works, and Kane's playing it dirty. The revelation that his cellmate was a former police officer added another layer of surreal complexity to Marcus's situation, but it also provided a potential source of insider knowledge. What can you tell me about how this kind of operation would work? Big Mike glanced around the cell, then moved closer to the other 2 men. If Kane's running a systematic frame-up operation, he'd need several things. First, a reliable way to identify targets, probably focusing on minorities in certain neighborhoods where complaints are less likely to be believed. Second, a steady supply of drugs to plant. Third, a dog that provides false alerts on command. Tommy was nodding along with the analysis. That makes sense. Every guy I talked to said the dog acted weird, not like the police dogs you see on TV, or like it was just going through motions. Here's what really bothers me, Marcus said, his voice taking on the commanding tone he'd used with his unit in Afghanistan. I've worked with military working dogs overseas. Rex's behavior was completely wrong for a trained narcotics detection dog. He was too playful, too unfocused. And the alert he gave was nothing like what a properly trained dog would do. The three men sat in contemplative silence for several minutes, each processing the implications of what they'd discovered. The fluorescent lights continued their incessant buzzing, and somewhere in the distance, a guard's radio crackled with routine communications. But in Cell Block C, something was crystallizing, an understanding that Marcus Williams hadn't just been the victim of bad luck or even individual corruption. He'd stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous, a systematic operation designed to manufacture drug arrests and destroy lives. And now, surrounded by concrete walls and steel bars, Marcus realized that his real battle was just beginning. The war hero who'd survived 3 combat deployments was about to face his greatest challenge on home soil, fighting a system that had already decided he was guilty. Lisa Rodriguez had been staring at the Marcus Williams case file for 3 hours straight, her second pot of coffee growing cold on the cluttered desk of her downtown Phoenix law office. The morning sun streamed through the blinds, casting long shadows across the documents spread before her like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. At 34, Lisa had built her reputation as one of the city's most tenacious criminal defense attorneys. But something about this case made her blood boil in a way that went beyond professional indignation. The call had come at 6 a.m. from Alana Williams, Marcus's sister, who worked as a paralegal at a corporate firm across town. Elena's voice had been thick with tears and desperation as she explained that her brother, a decorated war veteran with no criminal history, had been arrested for cocaine possession during what should have been a routine traffic stop. He doesn't even drink beer, Ms. Rodriguez, Elena had pleaded. There's no way he was carrying drugs. Someone set him up. Lisa had heard similar claims countless times over her 15-year career, and she'd learned to maintain professional skepticism while still fighting aggressively for her clients. But as she reviewed the police report, arrest records, and evidence inventory, her skepticism began transforming into something much more dangerous. Certainty that she was looking at a frame-up job so blatant it bordered on insulting. The police report was too clean, too perfect in its narrative. Officer Kane's account read like a textbook example of a justified drug arrest, suspicious behavior, lawful stop, probable cause established by a certified K9, drugs discovered in plain sight. But Lisa's trained eye caught the inconsistencies that a casual reader would miss. The timeline didn't quite add up. Kane claimed the entire encounter, from initial stop to arrest, took exactly 12 minutes. Yet his backup hadn't arrived until 14 minutes after his initial radio call, meaning Kane had supposedly searched the suspect and discovered evidence before backup was even on scene. More troubling was the evidence chain of custody. The cocaine allegedly found in Marcus's possession had been logged into evidence at 11:47 p.m., but according to Kane's own report, the arrest hadn't been completed until 11:52 p.m. Lisa made a note to have her investigator examine this discrepancy more closely. In her experience, sloppy paperwork often revealed deeper corruption. But it was Kane's arrest statistics that truly set off alarm bells. Lisa had pulled his records going back 2 years, and the pattern was unmistakable. 6 months ago, Kane's monthly drug arrests had suddenly tripled. Before January, he averaged 3 to 4 drug-related arrests per month. Since then, he was averaging 12 to 15. Even more suspicious, his success rate with drug prosecutions had jumped to an impossible 97%. Most defendants were pleading guilty rather than fighting charges. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from her private investigator. Jake Sullivan. Found something big on Kane. Meet me at usual spot in 20. Jake was a former Phoenix PD detective who'd been forced into early retirement after exposing corruption in the narcotics division 3 years earlier. His inside knowledge of police procedures and his network of contacts within the department made him invaluable for cases like this. 20 minutes later, Lisa sat across from Jake in a corner booth at Martinez Diner, a 24-hour establishment popular with cops, lawyers, and insomniacs. Jake looked exhausted, his normally neat appearance disheveled, but his eyes held the intensity of someone who'd uncovered something significant. I've been digging into Kane all night, Jake began without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table. What I found is going to make your day and ruin his career. Inside the folder were photocopies of internal affairs reports dating back 18 months. 3 separate complaints had been filed against Kane for evidence tampering, all involving minority suspects, all quietly dismissed by EA with notations like insufficient evidence and complainant credibility issues. But more damning were the witness statements. Jake had tracked down statements that had somehow never made it into the official EA files. Maria Santos, arrested 8 months ago, Jake explained, pointing to a highlighted section. She swears Kane planted heroin in her purse during a traffic stop. 2 witnesses saw him approach her car before backup arrived, but their statements were never included in the investigation. Santos took a plea deal because she couldn't afford to fight it. Lisa studied the documentation, her anger building with each page. This is systematic. How many victims are we talking about? At least 7 that I can confirm, probably more. All minorities, all poor, all pressured into plea deals to avoid trial. Jake leaned back in the booth, his expression grim. But here's the kicker. I found Kane's original canine certification records. His first dog, Ranger, died in a car accident exactly 6 months ago. The same week his arrest number spiked. What about Rex, the current dog? Jake's smile was wolfish. That's where it gets interesting. Rex isn't actually certified for narcotics detection. According to the training records, he washed out of the program for being too friendly and unfocused. He was supposed to be adopted out as a family pet when Kane somehow got him assigned as his new partner. Lisa felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. So Kane's using an untrained dog to provide false alerts, giving him probable cause to plant evidence. Exactly. And there's more. Jake pulled out his phone and showed Lisa a series of photographs. I followed Kane for 2 days. These shots show him visiting a known drug dealer's house 3 times, not for arrests, but meeting privately in the back alley. My guess is he's buying small quantities of drugs to plant on his targets. The photographs were damning evidence of Kane's corruption, but Lisa knew they were just the beginning. Building a case that could not only free Marcus, but expose the entire operation would require careful strategy and ironclad evidence. She thought about Marcus sitting in county lockup, probably wondering if anyone would believe his story. Jake, I need you to expand the investigation. Find every person Kane has arrested in the past 6 months. I want to interview them all, especially anyone who claimed they were framed. Already working on it. I've got addresses for 5 potential victims who might be willing to talk. Jake finished his coffee and stood to leave. Lisa, this is bigger than just one corrupt cop. If Kane's been running this operation for 6 months, he's had help. Internal Affairs doesn't dismiss 3 complaints against the same officer without someone higher up protecting him. After Jake left, Lisa sat alone in the diner booth, staring at the evidence spread before her. She thought about her own journey. To this moment, the daughter of Mexican immigrants, who'd worked 3 jobs to put herself through law school, who'd chosen criminal defense because she believed everyone deserved a fighter in their corner. Cases like this were exactly why she'd become a lawyer. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Elena Williams, calling with desperation in her voice. "Ms. Rodriguez, I just spoke to Marcus. He says there are other inmates who've been arrested by the same officer. He thinks it's some kind of pattern." Lisa smiled for the first time that day. "Elena, tell your brother not to worry. We're going to expose this pattern, and we're going to make sure Officer Kane never frames another innocent person again." As she gathered the files and prepared to return to her office, Lisa Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with taking on a righteous fight. She'd built her career on cases like this, David versus Goliath battles where truth and justice weren't just legal concepts, but weapons to be wielded against corruption and abuse of power. Jake Sullivan had been conducting investigations for 23 years, first as a Phoenix police detective and now as a private investigator, but he'd never worked a case that made him this angry. Sitting in his unmarked sedan across the street from Officer Kane's modest ranch house in Glendale at 5:47 a.m., Jake sipped lukewarm coffee from a thermos and watched the corrupt cop's morning routine through high-powered binoculars. For the past week, he'd been documenting Kane's every move, building a pattern of behavior that would either expose the truth or get Jake killed if Kane discovered the surveillance. Kane emerged from his house at precisely 6:15 a.m., just as he had every morning for the past 7 days. The officer appeared relaxed, almost cheerful, as he loaded his gear bag into his personal vehicle, a black Ford F-150 with tinted windows and a thin blue line sticker on the rear window. What Kane didn't know was that Jake had already identified 3 off-duty stops that had nothing to do with legitimate police business and everything to do with maintaining his drug-planting operation. The first breakthrough had come 3 days earlier when Jake followed Kane to a rundown apartment complex in South Phoenix. Instead of conducting official police business, Kane had met with Raymond Gutierrez, a low-level dealer Jake recognized from his days working narcotics. The meeting lasted exactly 4 minutes, with Kane leaving carrying a small paper bag that he immediately locked in his truck's glove compartment. Jake's telephoto lens had captured every moment of the transaction, creating photographic evidence that would be devastating in court. But it was Kane's second regular stop that truly revealed the scope of his corruption. Every Tuesday and Friday, Kane visited a storage unit facility on the outskirts of town. Through careful observation and a few well-placed bribes to facility employees, Jake discovered that Kane rented Unit 247 under his ex-wife's maiden name. The storage unit, according to Jake's source, contained boxes of evidence bags, latex gloves, and what appeared to be a small quantity of various controlled substances, essentially a mobile evidence planting kit. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from Lisa Rodriguez. "Bail hearing in 2 hours. Need update on Kane's pattern." Jake quickly typed back, "Have smoking gun evidence. 3 victims willing to testify." This is bigger than we thought. The victims Jake had located told remarkably similar stories. Maria Santos, a 34-year-old single mother, had been driving home from her cleaning job when Kane pulled her over for allegedly running a stop sign. Despite her protests, Kane's K-9 partner Rex had allegedly alerted to drugs in her vehicle, leading to the discovery of heroin in her purse. Maria swore the drugs weren't hers, and that she'd watched Kane approach her car before backup arrived. Then there was David Chun, a college student who'd been walking to his night job at a convenience store when Kane stopped him for suspicious behavior. Despite David's clean record and cooperative attitude, Rex had allegedly detected narcotics, and Kane discovered a bag of cocaine in David's backpack that David insisted had been empty when he left home. The most heartbreaking case was that of elderly Mrs. Patterson, a 72-year-old grandmother who'd been arrested after Cain claimed Rex alerted to drugs during a traffic stop for expired registration. The cocaine found in her glove compartment had resulted in felony charges that destroyed her reputation in the community and nearly caused her to lose custody of her grandchildren. Each victim's story contained the same disturbing elements: Cain working alone before backup arrived, Rex's questionable alert behavior, and the convenient discovery of drugs in locations that didn't make sense. More importantly, all three victims had been pressured by overworked public defenders to accept plea deals rather than fight the charges in court. Jake's investigation had also uncovered Cain's financial situation, which provided another piece of the puzzle. The officer was drowning in debt behind on his mortgage, facing garnishment of his wages for unpaid credit cards, and paying hefty alimony to his ex-wife. But over the past 6 months, Cain had made several large cash deposits to his checking account, deposits that didn't correspond to his police salary or any documented secondary income. The most damaging evidence, however, came from an unexpected source. Jake's former partner, Detective Sarah Mitchell, who still worked in the Phoenix PD K-9 unit, had agreed to review the official reports on Rex's alerts. What she discovered was professionally damning. Rex's supposed drug detection accuracy rate was statistically impossible. Real police dogs typically maintained a 70 to 80% accuracy rate under ideal conditions, but Rex was supposedly batting 100% on his alerts, with canine performance that would make him the most effective drug detection dog in the country. Either we're dealing with a miracle dog, Sarah had told Jake during a clandestine meeting at a coffee shop downtown, or someone's manufacturing positive alerts. Based on the behavioral descriptions in these reports, I'd bet my badge that Rex has never been properly trained for narcotics detection. Sarah's analysis revealed another crucial detail. The timing of Rex's alerts was consistently wrong. Properly trained dogs typically alert within seconds of detecting narcotics odor, but Rex's alerts were delayed and often occurred only after Cain had approached the suspect vehicle or person. The pattern suggested that Rex was responding to Cain's commands or signals rather than actually detecting drugs. Meanwhile, Lisa Rodriguez was building the legal framework for Marcus's defense. She'd filed motions challenging the legality of the stop, the reliability of the K-9 alert, and the chain of custody for the evidence. More importantly, she was preparing to argue that Marcus was the victim of a systematic pattern of misconduct that violated his constitutional rights. A bail hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. before Judge Patricia Morrison, a tough but fair jurist known for her skepticism of police testimony when evidence didn't add up. Lisa planned to present Jake's investigative findings and argue that Marcus posed no flight risk and was clearly the victim of a frame-up operation. As Jake continued his surveillance, he noticed Cain making an unscheduled stop at a payphone, an oddity in the age of cell phones that suggested the corrupt officer was trying to avoid creating electronic records of his communications. Jake photographed Cain making the call, noting the time and location for his report. The pieces of Cain's criminal operation were falling into place like dominoes. What had started as a simple drug possession case against an innocent veteran had evolved into an investigation of systematic police corruption that potentially involved dozens of victims and thousands of dollars in planted evidence. Jake finished his coffee and started his engine. It was time to attend Marcus Williams' bail hearing and watch Lisa Rodriguez begin the legal battle that would either expose one of Phoenix's most corrupt officers or destroy an innocent man's life forever. Either way, Jake Sullivan was determined to see justice done. The news of Marcus Williams' arrest hit the veteran community like a shockwave, rippling outward from the American Legion Post 41, where Marcus had been a regular attendee of their weekly poker games. By Thursday morning, less than 48 hours after his arrest, word had spread through an intricate network of former soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen who understood what it meant to have one of their own targeted by corrupt authority. Colonel James Peterson, Marcus's former commanding officer, was having his morning coffee when the call came from Sergeant First Class Miguel Santos, who'd served alongside Marcus in Kandahar during their second deployment. "Sir, they got Marcus on some bullshit drug charge," Santos said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. "Everyone who knows him knows he's cleaner than a church bell. This has to be a setup." Peterson set down his coffee mug with deliberate care. At 58, the retired officer had seen enough military justice proceedings to recognize the signs of a railroad job. Marcus Williams was one of the finest soldiers he'd ever commanded, a man who'd turned down alcohol at deployment farewell parties and had never even been written up for minor infractions. The idea that Marcus would suddenly start carrying cocaine was not just unlikely, it was impossible. Within 2 hours, Peterson was standing on the steps of the Maricopa County Courthouse, surrounded by a growing crowd of veterans in various stages of civilian dress, but all wearing their military bearing, like armor. Some wore their service branch caps, others displayed unit patches on worn leather jackets, but all shared the same expression of controlled fury that came from watching injustice unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," Peterson began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, Marcus Williams served this country with distinction through 3 combat deployments in Afghanistan. He earned a Bronze Star for valor, a Purple Heart for wounds received in action, and the respect of every soldier who served beside him. If our heroes can't trust our police, then who among us is safe? The crowd had grown to nearly 200 people, but Peterson's words carried clearly across the courthouse plaza. Local news crews, initially drawn by reports of a veteran protest, began to understand they were witnessing something larger, a community refusing to accept the destruction of one of their own. Among the crowd stood Teresa Williams, Marcus's 62-year-old mother, clutching a photograph of her son in his army dress uniform. Tears streamed down her face as she listened to Peterson describe the son she'd raised, the man she knew could never commit the crimes he was accused of. "My boy never even took an aspirin without reading the label twice," she whispered to the reporter standing beside her. "He wouldn't know cocaine if it bit him on the nose." The veteran community wasn't the only group rallying to Marcus's defense. Word of the arrest had spread through Roosevelt High School, where Marcus had volunteered as a mentor for at-risk students every Tuesday for the past 6 months. Principal Janet Davis stood at the podium during an emergency faculty meeting, her voice shaking with emotion as she addressed her staff. "Marcus Williams has spent countless hours helping our students navigate the challenges they face," Davis told the assembled teachers. "He's talked kids out of joining gangs, helped them find jobs, and shown them that there's a better path than the streets. The idea that this man would be involved with drugs is not just wrong, it's obscene." The story gained national attention when video of Colonel Peterson's speech went viral on social media. The hashtag Justice for Marcus began trending on Twitter, shared by military families, veterans organizations, and civil rights advocates who recognized the broader implications of the case. Within 48 hours, the GoFundMe campaign established for Marcus's legal defense had raised $75,000 from donors across the country. But the most powerful moment came during an impromptu press conference organized by the Phoenix chapter of the NAACP. Standing at the podium was Mrs. Dorothy Chun, the 72-year-old grandmother who'd been arrested by Officer Kane 4 months earlier. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the microphone, but her voice was steady and clear. "I never spoke up before because I was scared," Mrs. Chun began, her words carrying across the silent crowd. "I'm an old Chinese woman, and I thought nobody would believe me against a police officer. But when I heard about Mr. Williams, I knew. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. Mrs. Chun's story electrified the crowd. She described how Officer Kane had pulled her over for expired registration, how his dog had supposedly alerted to drugs, and how Kane had mysteriously discovered cocaine. In her glove compartment cocaine, she swore she'd never seen before in her life. The public defender had pressured her into a plea deal, warning that a jury might not believe an elderly immigrant woman against a police officer's testimony. They destroyed my reputation in my church community, Mrs. Chun continued, her voice growing stronger. My own grandchildren were ashamed to be seen with me. But if speaking up now can help Mr. Williams and stop this officer from hurting anyone else, then I'll tell my story to anyone who will listen. Her words sparked a chain reaction. Within hours, Lisa Rodriguez's office was flooded with calls from other potential victims, people who'd been arrested by Officer Kane under similar circumstances and had accepted plea deals rather than fight. Charges they couldn't afford to contest. Each story followed the same disturbing pattern. Minor traffic violations escalating to drug possession. Charges based on questionable K-9 alerts and convenient evidence discoveries. The media attention created pressure that reached the highest levels of Phoenix City government. Mayor Robert Johnson, facing a re-election campaign and criticism over rising police misconduct complaints, announced the formation of a special committee to review Kane's recent arrests. The police union initially defended Kane, but their support began wavering as more victims came forward, and the evidence of systematic corruption became undeniable. By Friday evening, the momentum had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a simple drug possession case against an unknown veteran had evolved into a citywide conversation about police accountability and systemic racism. The community's support gave Marcus hope during his darkest hours in county lockup, but more importantly, it provided Lisa Rodriguez with the resources and witness testimony she needed to build an unassailable defense. Standing in her office late that night, surrounded by boxes of evidence and witness statements, Lisa Rodriguez realized she was no longer just defending one innocent man. She was leading a fight against institutional corruption that had destroyed dozens of lives and would destroy dozens more if left unchecked. The community had rallied around Marcus Williams, but now it was time for the legal system to deliver the justice they were all demanding. The breakthrough came at 11:47 p.m. on a rain-soaked Thursday evening when Lisa Rodriguez was buried deep in Officer Kane's personnel file, her eyes burning from hours of reading under the harsh fluorescent lights of her law office. What she discovered would fundamentally change not just Marcus Williams' case, but her understanding of how deep the corruption truly ran within the Phoenix Police Department. The file she'd fought for 3 weeks to obtain through court orders was thick with documentation, spanning Kane's 8-year career with the department. Most of it read like typical police bureaucracy performance reviews, training certificates, commendations for routine police work. But buried on page 247 of the employment records was a single line that made Lisa's blood run cold. K-9 unit assignment terminated. December 15, 2024. Reason: death of certified partner ranger, badge #K90847. Lisa sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Kane's original police dog, Ranger, had died exactly 6 months ago, the precise moment when Kane's arrest statistics had mysteriously skyrocketed. But if Ranger was dead, who was Rex? And more importantly, how had Kane continued working as a K-9 officer without a certified partner? She grabbed her phone and called Jake Sullivan, despite the late hour. Jake answered on the first ring, his voice alert despite the time. "Please tell me you found something that's going to bury this bastard," he said without preamble. "Jake, I need you to dig into the Phoenix PD K-9 training records immediately. Find everything you can about a dog named Ranger and when he died. And find out how Rex got assigned as Kane's partner. On it. Give me 2 hours. While waiting for Jake's research, Lisa dove deeper into Kane's file, looking for any mention of Rex or his training certification. What she found instead were 3 internal affairs complaints that had been mysteriously filed and then withdrawn before investigation. Each complaint followed the same pattern. A defendant claiming Kane had planted evidence. Initial investigation opened, then suddenly closed with notation. Complainant recanted statement. No further action required. Lisa's investigative instincts kicked into overdrive. In 15 years of criminal defense work, she'd never seen 3 separate defendants voluntarily recant identical complaints against the same officer. Someone with significant power had been protecting Kane, ensuring that his victim stayed silent and his operation remained undiscovered. Jake called back at 1:23 a.m., his voice tight with excitement and disbelief. "Lisa, you're not going to believe what I found. Ranger didn't just die 6 months ago. He was killed in a suspicious car accident while off duty with Kane. But here's the kicker. Rex isn't a police dog at all." "What do you mean?" "I mean Rex is listed in the city animal control records as a failed canine candidate who is scheduled for adoption as a family pet. According to the training records, Rex washed out of the program after 4 weeks because he was too friendly, too easily distracted, and completely unable to master basic narcotics detection protocols." Lisa felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking together with devastating clarity. So Kane's been using an untrained family pet to provide false alerts? "It gets worse," Jake continued. "I found the adoption paperwork. Rex was supposed to be adopted by a family named Martinez 6 months ago, right after Ranger died. But the adoption was mysteriously canceled at the last minute, and Rex was reassigned to Kane as his new partner." The name Martinez struck Lisa like a lightning bolt. She frantically shuffled through her case files until she found Marcus's arrest report. The backup officer who'd arrived with Rex that night was Officer Martinez, the same Martinez family who was supposed to adopt the dog. "Jake, I need you to find Officer Martinez immediately. Something tells me he's the key to this entire operation." Within 24 hours, Jake had located Officer Ricardo Martinez at his home in Tempe, where he lived with his wife and 2 young children. Martinez was a 12-year veteran of the Phoenix PDK-9 unit with an exemplary record and a reputation for honesty that even his fellow officers respected. When Jake approached him off-duty, Martinez's reaction was telling. "You're asking about Rex?" Martinez said, his face growing pale. "I've been wondering when someone would finally start asking the right questions." What Martinez revealed during their 2-hour conversation would become the foundation of the prosecution's case against Kane. Martinez explained that Rex had been his family's intended pet, a gentle, playful German shepherd who'd failed police training, but would have made an excellent family companion. His children had even named the dog and were excited about the adoption. But 3 days before the adoption was finalized, Martinez received a call from his supervisor, Captain Brooks. "There's been a change of plans," Brooks had told him. "Rex is being reassigned as Kane's new canine partner. Department orders." Martinez had protested, explaining that Rex had no narcotics training and wasn't suitable for police work, but Brooks cut him off. "This comes from above my pay grade, Martinez. Kane needs a dog. Rex is available. End of discussion." What happened next revealed the truly insidious nature of the conspiracy. Martinez was ordered to falsify Rex's training records, backdating certification documents to make it appear that Rex had successfully completed narcotics detection training. When Martinez refused, he was threatened with suspension and potential termination for insubordination. "I should have blown the whistle right then," Martinez told Jake, his voice heavy with regret. "But I have 2 kids and a mortgage. I couldn't risk losing my job. So I signed the papers and kept my mouth shut while Kane used my family's dog to frame innocent people. Martinez's conscience had been eating at him for months. He'd watched Kane's arrest numbers climb while knowing that Rex couldn't detect drugs if his life depended on it. The gentle dog that should have been playing fetch with Martinez's children was instead being used as a weapon against innocent citizens. The most damaging revelation came when Martinez described how Kane controlled Rex during arrests. Rex responds to hand signals, not drug odors, Martinez explained. Kane trained him to sit on command using treats and praise. The dog thinks it's a game. He has no idea he's helping destroy people's lives. But Martinez had kept detailed notes of his conversations with supervisors, including Captain Brooks's explicit orders to falsify Rex's certification records. He also had copies of the original training evaluations that clearly showed Rex's failures in narcotics detection testing. Armed with Martinez's testimony and documentation, Lisa Rodriguez realized she now had evidence of a conspiracy that went far beyond one corrupt officer. Captain Brooks, and potentially others in the police hierarchy, had knowingly facilitated Kane's evidence-planting operation by providing him with an untrained dog and falsified certification records. As dawn broke over Phoenix, Lisa sat in her office surrounded by the evidence that would not only free Marcus Williams, but potentially bring down a network of corruption that had been operating with impunity for months. The shocking discovery of Rex's true nature had revealed a conspiracy so brazen and systematic that it challenged everything the community believed about their police department. The stage was now set for a legal battle that would expose the truth and demand justice for Marcus Williams and the dozens of other victims who had been failed by a system designed to protect them. The morning of March 15th dawned crisp and clear over downtown Phoenix as hundreds of people gathered outside the Maricopa County Superior Court building. News vans lined the streets, their satellite dishes reaching toward a cloudless sky, while reporters practiced their opening statements and camera crews tested their equipment. The trial of Marcus Williams had become more than a criminal case. It was a referendum on police corruption and institutional accountability that had captured national attention. Inside courtroom 4A, Judge Patricia Wong adjusted her black robes and surveyed the packed gallery with the stern gaze of someone who had presided over thousands of cases during her 22-year judicial career. At 61, Judge Wong was known throughout the legal community for her razor-sharp intellect, her intolerance for courtroom theatrics, and her unwavering commitment to following the law regardless of public pressure or political considerations. Marcus Williams sat at the defense table, wearing a navy blue suit his sister Elena had brought from home, his military bearing evident even in this civilian setting. His hands were folded calmly on the table before him, but Lisa Rodriguez could see the tension in his shoulders and the slight tremor in his fingers that betrayed his nervousness. Behind him, the gallery was filled with supporters, veterans in dress uniforms, teachers from Roosevelt High School, community activists, and members of Marcus's family who had traveled from across the country to show their support. On the opposite side of the courtroom, District Attorney Michael Harrison sat with his prosecution team, their confidence noticeably diminished from the swagger they'd displayed during pre-trial hearings. Harrison was a career prosecutor with political ambitions who had initially viewed this case as an easy win. A decorated veteran gone bad would play well with tough-on-crime voters. But as Lisa's investigation had uncovered the truth about Officer Kane's corruption, Harrison found himself in the uncomfortable position of prosecuting a case built on fabricated evidence. The first witness called by the prosecution was Officer Kane himself, who took the stand with the practiced confidence of someone who had testified in dozens of drug cases over his 8-year career. Dressed in his crisp Class A uniform with his service ribbons precisely aligned, Kane projected the image of professional competence that juries typically found credible and trustworthy. Under direct examination by prosecutor Sarah Coleman, Kane recounted the night of Marcus's arrest with methodical precision. His testimony was a masterclass in police procedure. He described observing suspicious behavior, conducting a lawful traffic stop, calling for canine backup, and watching as his certified partner Rex alerted to the presence of narcotics in the defendant's vehicle. Officer Kane, Cullen asked, in your professional opinion, was there any doubt about the validity of Rex's alert that evening? None whatsoever, Kane replied with unwavering certainty. Rex is one of the finest narcotics detection dogs I've ever worked with. His alert was textbook perfect, clear, decisive, and unmistakable. Based on that alert, I had probable cause to search the vehicle, whereupon I discovered approximately 2 grams of powder cocaine hidden under the passenger seat. Kane's testimony continued for 2 hours, during which he painted Marcus as a suspicious individual whose nervous behavior and evasive answers had raised multiple red flags. He described finding the cocaine in a location that suggested Marcus had attempted to conceal it, but had panicked when pulled over. The prosecution's case seemed airtight, built on the testimony of an experienced officer and his certified canine partner. But Lisa Rodriguez had been waiting for this moment for months. As she rose to begin her cross-examination, the courtroom fell silent with anticipation. She approached the witness stand with the measured stride of a predator closing in on wounded prey, carrying a thick folder that Kane eyed with growing unease. Officer Kane, Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. You testified that Rex is one of the finest narcotics detection dogs you've ever worked with. How long have you been partnered with Rex? Approximately 6 months, Kane replied, his first answer already revealing a crack in his armor. And before Rex, you were partnered with a dog named Ranger, correct? Kane's jaw tightened slightly. That's correct. Ranger died in a car accident last December. Lisa opened her folder and withdrew a document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into Evidence Defense Exhibit A, the official Phoenix Police Department K-9 training records for the dog known as Rex. The prosecution team exchanged nervous glances as Lisa handed copies of the document to the court clerk, the prosecution, and the jury. Kane's face remained impassive, but attentive observers could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead, despite the courtroom's air conditioning. Officer Kane, according to these official records, Rex never completed narcotics detection training, did he? That's incorrect, Kane stammered, his practiced confidence beginning to crumble. Rex is fully certified for narcotics detection. Lisa approached the witness stand, holding up the training records. These documents show that Rex was enrolled in the K-9 training program, but was removed after 4 weeks for being unable to master basic detection protocols and displaying behavior inconsistent with police work requirements. Isn't that correct? The courtroom erupted in whispers as Kane struggled to formulate a response. Judge Wong gavelled for order while Kane's attorney, provided by the police union, looked as if he wanted to disappear into his chair. Furthermore, Lisa continued, pressing her advantage, these same records indicate that Rex was scheduled for adoption as a family pet to Officer Ricardo Martinez's family before being mysteriously reassigned to you 3 days before the adoption was finalized. Were you aware of this? Kane's composure finally shattered. Those records ... There must be some mistake. Rex received full training. I have the certification documents. You mean these certification documents? Lisa produced another file, this one marked with red evidence tags. The ones that Officer Martinez was ordered to backdate and falsify by Captain Brooks. The ones that Martinez has sworn under oath or fabricated to cover up Rex's lack of training? The prosecution table erupted in frantic whispers as Day Harrison, realized his star witness was being systematically destroyed. Kane looked desperately toward his attorney, but found no help there. The union lawyer was frantically scribbling notes, probably calculating how quickly he could distance the police union from this disaster. Officer Kane. Lisa's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. Isn't it true that Rex has never been trained to detect narcotics? That his alerts are actually responses to hand signals you give him, and that you've been using this untrained family pet to manufacture probable cause for illegal searches? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Kane opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. His face had turned ashen, and his hands trembled as he gripped the witness stand rail. After 8 months of systematically destroying innocent lives, Officer Kane found himself trapped by the very lies he had built his corrupt operation upon. Judge Wong leaned forward, her expression stern. Officer Kane, you will answer the question. Kane's voice was barely a whisper when he finally spoke. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The courtroom exploded in chaos as reporters rushed to file their stories and spectators voiced their outrage. Judge Wong pounded her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, but the damage was done. Officer Kane's refusal to answer had essentially confirmed every accusation Lisa had made, and everyone in the courtroom knew that Marcus Williams was not just innocent. He was the victim of a systematic conspiracy that reached deep into the Phoenix Police Department. The third day of Marcus Williams' trial dawned with an electric tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the downtown Phoenix courthouse. Word of Officer Kane's spectacular collapse on the witness stand had spread like wildfire through social media, with hashtag Justice for Marcus trending nationally alongside devastating clips of Kane invoking his Fifth Amendment rights. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, with overflow crowds watching on screens in adjacent rooms and hundreds more gathered on the courthouse steps. Judge Patricia Wong called the court to session at precisely 9 a.m., her stern gaze sweeping across the packed gallery before settling on the defense table, where Marcus Williams sat with quiet dignity. The past 3 days had taken their toll. Marcus looked exhausted but resolute, understanding that this final day would determine not just his freedom, but the fate of countless other victims of police corruption. Lisa Rodriguez rose from her chair with the confident bearing of an attorney who knew she held the winning hand. Over the past 72 hours, her methodical destruction of the prosecution's case had been nothing short of masterful. Officer Martinez's emotional testimony about being forced to falsify Rex's training records had reduced several jurors to tears. Dr. Sarah Mitchell's expert analysis of proper K-9 behavior had scientifically demolished any pretense that Rex was a trained police dog. And the parade of Kane's previous victims, Mrs. Chun, David Chun, Maria Santos, and 4 others, had painted a devastating picture of systematic corruption that had destroyed innocent lives. But Lisa knew that, despite the overwhelming evidence, she needed one final moment of unassailable truth that would leave no doubt in anyone's mind about Marcus's innocence. That moment would come through Marcus's own testimony, but in a way that no one in the courtroom could possibly anticipate. Your Honor, Lisa announced, the defense calls Marcus Williams to the stand. Marcus rose slowly, his military bearing evident as he walked to the witness stand. He had testified the previous day about his background, 3 tours in Afghanistan, the Bronze Star for Valor, his work mentoring at-risk youth, his spotless record both in the military and as a civilian. His voice had been steady and clear as he described the night of his arrest, maintaining his innocence with quiet conviction that resonated through the courtroom. But today was different. Today, Lisa had one final card to play. As Marcus settled into the witness chair, Lisa approached with a knowing smile that made the prosecution team visibly nervous. District Attorney Harrison had already begun damage control, quietly discussing plea bargain options with his staff, while trying to salvage what remained of his political career. Marcus, Lisa began, using his first name to emphasize the personal nature of what was about to unfold. I want you to take a careful look around this courtroom. Do you see anything or anyone that you recognize from before the night of your arrest? Marcus's eyes swept across the packed gallery, taking in the familiar faces of family, friends, and supporters. His gaze moved past the prosecution table, where Kane sat slumped in defeat, to the court reporter, the bailiffs, and finally to the corner where Rex sat panting beside Officer Martinez. For a moment, Marcus simply stared at the German shepherd, his expression changing from confusion to recognition to something approaching wonder. The courtroom fell completely silent as everyone followed Marcus's gaze to the dog who had allegedly detected drugs in his vehicle that night 6 months ago. Yes, Marcus said softly, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed courtroom. I do recognize someone. And who do you recognize? Lisa asked, though she already knew the answer. That would change everything. Marcus stood up from the witness chair, his movement causing a ripple of anticipation through the courtroom. Judge Wong leaned forward, sensing that something extraordinary was about to happen. The jury members sat transfixed, their attention completely focused on the defendant, who had just spotted something that would rewrite the entire narrative of his case. Marcus raised his right hand and pointed directly at Rex, who was lying calmly beside Officer Martinez's chair. The dog's ears perked up at the sudden attention, his tail beginning to wag with the recognition that was flooding back through his canine memory. "Hey, buddy," Marcus called out, his voice filled with genuine joy and affection. The reaction was immediate and undeniable. Rex leaped to his feet, his tail wagging furiously as he barked with excitement and strained against his leash. Officer Martinez, caught completely off guard, struggled to control the suddenly animated dog as Rex pulled toward Marcus with desperate eagerness. "Down, Rex," Martinez commanded, but the dog ignored him completely, focused entirely on the man who had just called his real name. The courtroom erupted in gasps and exclamations as Rex broke free from Martinez's control and bounded toward the witness stand. The bailiffs moved to intervene, but Judge Wong held up her hand, understanding that she was witnessing something that transcended normal courtroom protocol. Rex reached Marcus and immediately began jumping up, his front paws on Marcus's chest as he licked his face with unrestrained joy. The German shepherd was trembling with excitement, whining and barking as he tried to climb into Marcus's arms like a puppy reuniting with its beloved owner. "Buddy, I thought you were dead," Marcus said, his voice breaking with emotion as he wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. "The Hendersons told me you'd been killed by a car 6 months ago. I looked for you everywhere." The truth crashed over the courtroom like a tsunami. This wasn't just any dog. This was Marcus's neighbor's missing pet, a gentle family companion who had disappeared from the Henderson family's backyard 6 months earlier. The same time frame when Kane's arrest numbers had mysteriously skyrocketed. The same time frame when Ranger had died and Rex had been reassigned to Kane. Lisa Rodriguez felt tears streaming down her face as she watched Marcus reunite with the dog he had helped search for during those desperate weeks after Buddy's disappearance. She had known Rex wasn't a trained police dog, but she had never imagined this personal connection that made Kane's corruption even more grotesque. "Your Honor," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion, "the defense rests." Judge Wong's gavel came down with finality as she dismissed all charges against Marcus Williams. The courtroom exploded in cheers and applause as Marcus remained on his knees, holding Buddy close while the dog continued to shower him with affectionate licks. Within hours, Officer Kane was arrested on charges of evidence tampering, false imprisonment, perjury, and civil rights violations. Captain Brooks was suspended pending investigation. The Phoenix Police Department announced a comprehensive review of all drug arrests involving canine units over the past 2 years. But perhaps most importantly, Buddy, no longer Rex the fake police dog, went home with the Henderson family, where he belonged. And Marcus Williams walked free, vindicated not just by evidence and testimony, but by the unwavering loyalty of a dog who remembered the man who had loved him enough to search for him in the darkness.